This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Tonight, we're diving into today's Supreme Court decision that can finally reveal financial records the president has been fighting to keep private. Plus, a new look at a controversial medication with big impacts on reproductive health. But first, let's get you caught up on the latest. The nation is seeing new record highs for COVID cases, surpassing 59,000 daily cases. If you zoom in a little closer, you'll see that most states are seeing cases on the rise, and at least 5 states reported single-day records for new cases. Although many states are dialing back efforts to reopen their economies, Dr. Fauci said on Wednesday that states with serious issues should consider shutting down. Of course, that's a decision left up to the states themselves. The start of school is roughly a month away, and there's still a lot to be decided on how schools are handling the pandemic. Earlier this week, the CDC released guidelines for reopening school districts that include suggestions like providing ample cloth face coverings and other supplies, and modifying classroom layouts. The White House called them extremely expensive, but the CDC reiterated today they are simply guidelines, and they will not be revising them. In an interview today, Newsy spoke with Dr. Deborah Birx, a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Here's what she had to say about the back-to-school debate.
Do you bring in half the students in the morning, half the students in the afternoon, so that you can run buses half full to both bring them to school and take them home, and then pick up the next group and bring them home? Options like that lay it out.
Across the country, 1.3 million workers filed new unemployment claims last week. Even as some businesses reopen and rehire employees who had been temporarily laid off earlier in the year, the number of Americans shopping, dining out, and just generally doing the normal things that drive the economy has been low as COVID case numbers continue to surge. One example of this is in the airline industry, where even as airlines continue to operate, the number of people flying is only about 1/4 of what it was at this time last year. As a result, airlines say they'll likely lay off tens of thousands of employees this fall. The Supreme Court has made a lot of news lately, and not much of it has been good news for President Trump. That's definitely the case in today's ruling, which will allow New York prosecutors to get their hands on the president's tax records. But as Newsy's Stephanie Liebergen tells us, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll be seeing those records anytime soon.
The Supreme Court has weighed in, and President Donald Trump can't unilaterally keep all his tax and financial records a secret. The Supreme Court handed down 2 decisions Thursday linked to President Trump's financial records. One order stems from congressional subpoenas from the House Oversight, Intelligence, and Financial Services Committees. The second order is linked to a grand jury subpoena from a New York County investigation into payments made to Stormy Daniels, who says she had an affair with the president. In a 7-2 decision in the congressional case, the Supreme Court said the president can't categorically reject the committee's subpoenas to Mazars, Deutsche Bank, and Capital One, but the documents requested might go too far. In the decision, Chief Justice John Roberts said the standards proposed by the president would risk seriously impeding Congress in carrying out its responsibilities. But the order also faults the breadth of the committee's subpoenas. Roberts wrote the House's defense would essentially leave no limits on the congressional power to subpoena the president's personal records. The case will now go back to the lower courts, which have been instructed to better consider separation of powers concerns. In the New York case, it was another 7-2 decision opposing the president's statements that he's immune from criminal subpoenas while he's in office. In that decision, Roberts said presidents from Monroe to Clinton have accepted that the chief executive is subject to subpoena and have uniformly agreed to testify when called in criminal proceedings. The case will now go back to the lower court, where New York District Attorney Cyrus Vance and the president's legal team will need to come to an agreement on what documents to release. The president has been fighting for years to keep his personal financial details to himself, but Thursday's rulings don't necessarily mean President Trump's financial records will eventually become public. Once an agreement is struck in New York, the documents will be turned over to a grand jury where the proceedings are secret. In the House, Democrats are expected to push for the potentially damaging documents to be made public before the November election. But it's unclear when or if that would happen, since the case will need to be re-litigated in the lower courts. Stephanie Liebergen, Newsy, Miami.
Next up, when it comes to handling economic fallout from the pandemic, we might have a thing or two to learn from Europe.
When you see a ghost forest for the first time, you're struck by how eerie it is. We've got dead trees, that mark where the land was 10, 20, 50 years ago. They're the most striking indicator that I know of climate change anywhere on the East Coast.
Sure. Memes and cat videos are fun, but actual news might be a bit more useful. Follow Newsy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get straightforward, opinion-free news right on your social news feed.
We still don't have an edit button, but that's not going to stop us from playing around in Twitter's trending topics column. Here's what's trending. Batwoman is trending after it was announced that Javicia Leslie, a black woman who is bisexual, will take over as the other Caped Crusader in the second season of the CW series. Leslie will play a new character named Ryan Wilder, who one writer describes as likable, messy, goofy, and untamed. I mean, same. Leslie was cast as the first black woman to play the role after Ruby Rose left the show. Batwoman the show has only been around since 2019, but it's already gotten some kudos for being the first show featuring an out lesbian superhero. And some casting news of a different sort. Joy Reid is taking over Chris Matthews' spot on MSNBC. Matthews was a staple of the channel's primetime lineup for 2 decades, but was forced to step down earlier this year after accusations of sexism. Reid will be one of just a few black women anchoring primetime evening news programs in the US. And Bill Nye is trending because, you know what? First, let's do this. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill. America's TV science guy is trending after posting a TikTok that breaks down the benefits of wearing a mask in very direct terms.
The reason we want you to wear a mask is to protect you, sure. But the main reason we want you to wear a mask is to protect me from you.
So yeah, the science guy is not always the nice science guy, but well, he's right. This pandemic is a global problem, which means it's one of those rare issues that lets us compare and contrast just how countries all over the world are dealing with the same thing. And when it comes to the economic fallout from the pandemic, there's been a huge difference in approaches. As Newsy's Zach Toombs shows us in our virology series, the US and Europe are a prime example.
If you have like a normal salary, they make sure you receive your normal salary.
It enables me to live. It enables me to keep both myself and my business afloat.
The employed workers are being guaranteed pretty much a sum of about £25,000.
The United States and Europe have both felt the economic blow of the pandemic. Businesses closed. Recovery has been slow. But the economic damage and the financial pressure on individual citizens looks very different on either side of the Atlantic.
There's the huge economic toll on American families, with a record 3.2 million people filing for unemployment benefits.
I wouldn't want to switch with some of my friends in the US right now.
In response to coronavirus, the U.S. government is expanding who gets included and how much is paid through unemployment benefits. But the aid package does relatively little to help businesses cover workers' salaries or keep people employed. And now the U.S. is seeing millions lose their jobs. While the U.S. prioritizes getting money to the unemployed, governments across Europe are taking a different approach, freezing their economies in place by directly paying workers' salaries, which for now is preventing the massive job losses seen in the U.S. Of course, different countries all handle this differently, but throughout Europe, a strong social safety net and a focus on keeping people employed has been a consistent theme. To see what that looks like on a personal level, we talked to a handful of Europeans impacted by their country's efforts to freeze their economies.
My name is Henrik Moslund. I'm from Denmark. Me and my wife, we have a cafe in a small town called Æbeltoft.
My name's Charlie and I run a craftsperson collective that's based in Berlin.
We take surplus produce and sell that to restaurants, big kitchens, schools, kindergartens.
I am a classical musician, so I'm a conductor and a singer.
I work in the event sector, but I mean, everything is cancelled on the 1st of June.
So last weekend we decided to completely shut the business until further notice.
We've gone down with like 60% of our income.
50 to 60% of our revenues breaking away.
We have no income through that for 2 months, 3 months, could be 4 months, could be way more than that. We simply don't know.
But they're taking care of people that can lose hours at their job. They're making sure that's subsidized via the government.
If a company was to furlough any worker, that is to say, well, we're laying them off, but we want to retain them on our books. The government is guaranteeing 80% of your salary up to a maximum of about £25,000.
Say I own a cafe and I have 10 staff and I can't afford to pay them all 100% of their wage. They accept a cut in wage to like 60%, and then the state helps pay for some of that.
So it's quite good, and we'll get by on that. We're not going to get our savings growing right now or anything, but we'll survive.
I'm really glad I don't have to have any existential fears in my current position with a crisis like that rolling out, because it seems so far that the aid that our system here is providing is working, at least for me.
In the US, losing your job also often means losing your health care, or at least the ability to pay for adequate care. That's a big concern, especially during a global pandemic, and it's something Europeans can't quite wrap their heads around.
I'm also guessing that if you don't have a job, you guys don't have healthcare, right? Sorry, that. I mean, I can't even imagine what that does to a person. We pay taxes for it. We pay a partial sum from our salary for this. This is how the whole system works.
You got free healthcare and all that, so it's not like a financial thing. If you get ill, you get pretty good treatment here.
I think the real issue is that there are countries in the world who constantly think about what might happen. Why we want a worst case scenario here, and we want to look out for people if that happens. And there are other countries in the world who will say, well, if that happens, we've got enough resources to deal with it at that point, but we're not going to put anything in place until that happens.
Much like Blue's Clues, you can play along with this show at home by taking this clue to Twitter and letting us know what you think. It's like our own personal mail time.
Native women have told me that what you do when you raise a daughter is you prepare her for what to do when she's raised, not if, but when.
Why are we different than every other person? Why don't we have the justice everybody else does?
At Newsy, we're focused on facts and solutions.
Talking with medical workers on the front lines, decision makers, and everyday people.
All of us fighting COVID-19.
Newsy, be informed, not influenced.
For 20 years, the abortion pill, a medication that helps end a pregnancy, has been available to the U.S. market, but access to the drug has been difficult for some. It isn't available over the counter, and it's still highly regulated by the FDA, even though the health agency says it's safe to use. In a Newsy investigation called Prescription Denied, reporters Angela Hill and Karen Rodriguez look into why the drug is so heavily regulated and what effect that has had on those looking to access it. Here's just one part of the story.
Politics kept the abortion pill out of the U.S. market for years, but in the 1990s, politics helped bring it in.
This is a revolutionary technology that women could take a pill and have an abortion. Think about that. You don't need a sterilization of a hypodermic needle. You don't need a surgeon. You don't need any kind of anesthesia.
The abortion pill is the first drug taken to begin a medication abortion by blocking a hormone that maintains a pregnancy. A second drug then expels a pregnancy, completing the abortion. When it was approved, the FDA restricted access. The pill would not be available at pharmacies with a prescription because the agency wanted to monitor its safety.
There's kind of a marketing spin that you pop this pill and poof, the pregnancy's over. But that's not the reality of a mifeprex abortion. It can take days or weeks. You can have serious hemorrhaging. And I'm concerned that women are not being told these risks.
Today, a lot more is known about the safety of mifeprex for medication abortion. The FDA has a database that tracks side effects, complications, and even deaths after a drug is taken. About 3.7 million women have had a medication abortion. Since that time, there have been 24 reports of women dying in the U.S. after taking the abortion pill, according to FDA records, which means for every 1 million patients, 6.5 died.
Well, these are women that were normal, healthy, pregnant, and then they're dead.
But when you take a closer look, none of the 24 deaths can be causally attributed to mifeprex. In other words, there's no direct link between taking the pill and dying. And nearly half of those deaths are associated with things like homicide, suicide, drug abuse, and emphysema.
It's really very safe and effective. It's extremely rare to have a bad outcome, more rare than with most other approved drugs.
So despite what the FDA's own data shows, they say that mifeprex is too risky to be sold at a pharmacy with a prescription. So the only way a patient can get mifeprex is if they find a certified healthcare provider and go to their office to get the pill.
Why can't you pick this pill up in a pharmacy? Exactly what is more dangerous about picking a pill up in a pharmacy than having somebody give it to you in a clinic and you take it home and you swallow it?
COVID-19 has amplified the burdens of many women in rural and medically underserved communities that have to travel hundreds of miles to find a certified healthcare provider to dispense mifeprex.
It's been chaos. We've had health centers flooded with calls from patients who are worried about their ability to get the care that they need. That means either exposing themselves or other people to the new coronavirus.
Which is why the ACLU recently filed a federal lawsuit to temporarily lift the FDA restrictions during the pandemic.
The FDA is there to protect the people who take drugs, the consumer, and they do a very good job. Given where we are in space and time, they need to reevaluate the balance, because the burden is clearly not worth what these regulations are causing.
Angela Hill, Newsy, Washington.
We just watched an excerpt from Prescription Denied. It's a piece by Angela Hill and Karen Rodriguez. We still had a few more questions, so we decided to dial up Angela, who is joining us on the show. Angela, how's it going?
It's going great, Christian.
Where did this reporting journey start for you all? What was the impetus for covering this particular story?
And so it was really just trying to understand why this drug, which had been deemed to be safe by a number of accounts, was so heavily restricted. And when we say restricted, meaning that unlike many other drugs, you cannot access this drug with a prescription at a pharmacy.
One of the things that you point out in this piece is the number of deaths attributed to mifeprex, more than 20. A good number of those deaths, it almost seems like there's an asterisk, whether it was homicide or suicide or a drug overdose of some sort. What did those deaths really signify for you?
About 3.7 million patients who have taken this drug since it came on the market back in 2000. And we hear a lot of people say, opponents of this drug, who say, oh, so many women have died. And so we were curious, like, how many women have actually died from taking this drug? We saw that there were 24 deaths, and I want to be careful and say 24 deaths causally associated with this drug. And the reason that's important is because we can't say there is a direct correlation. There isn't a direct link to a patient taking this drug and then them dying. So again, it just kind of raises the question of why this particular drug is so heavily restricted. The topic of abortion is very divisive in our country, and one of the things that Karen and I were very careful about and wanted to be careful about is that we did not want to make this a political story or, one side versus the other. We wanted to be very focused on the safety of the drug and how the FDA has responded to making the drug available, accessible, or not.
I appreciate the time, Angela. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this in person one of these days, right?
Look forward to it.
All right, thank you so much. You can watch the full investigation wherever you stream Newsy. When you're back, we'll talk about what airlines are and aren't doing to help keep passengers safe during this pandemic. Despite the really clear benefits to public health, requiring a mask is still something being debated across the country. I mean, when I'm walking down the street, I debate with myself as to whether I should keep my mask up, and the answer is always mask up, always. Now, with more people flying than earlier in the pandemic, the argument has taken flight. Sorry for the pun. Newsy's Patrick Terpstra looks into why a plain policy on masks can only go so far.
More people are flying again, including Amanda Davis.
I'm one of those people that said I would not fly no matter what.
But then a friend offered to fly her out to Denver to reunite with her children.
So I'm like, well, I can't say no to that. Like, I want to see my kids.
Most airlines now require passengers to wear face coverings, with few exceptions. So Davis was surprised to see two guys by her pull and keep their masks down once the plane was in the sky.
I've been so careful to watch somebody that's sharing the same air with you just not care at all. And it makes me angry.
Before takeoff, flight attendants announced masks are mandatory or you can be banned from future flights.
It sounded serious, but it wasn't enforced.
Pilot Dennis Tazier says it can be difficult for flight crews to enforce mask requirements because it's not the law.
You talk to anybody out on the street, hey, it's a federal crime if you don't. That gets the attention more than it's our company policy.
There also are no regulations for social distancing, despite photos of full flights like this from an outraged senator. Lawmakers, passengers, and flight crew unions have called on the FAA to set policies for fighting the virus, known to spread through air. But we found resistance from the airline industry, trying to stay aloft financially.
Right now, he is wiping down the PS units.
Airlines for America, representing the major carriers, says mandates are not necessary because airlines have been implementing extraordinary measures to protect passengers and crews. That includes using HEPA filters, able to trap coronavirus, though the particles must first travel through the cabin air. The association's CEO talked to NPR.
We don't fly people if we feel it's not safe.
The National Air Carrier Association says social distancing rules would force airlines to increase fares and result in several airline bankruptcies in an industry struggling with record low demand. The government says it is advising the airlines on coronavirus, even if it is not passing new regulations.
When the federal government gets involved, we tend to be much more heavy-handed. We tend to be inflexible. And once we put a rule in place, it takes a long time to remove that rule if the conditions change.
The Transportation Department recommends airlines warn passengers if a flight is too full for social distancing and strongly encourage everyone wear a mask except children under 2 and those with medical conditions. Pilot Dennis Tazier says aside from passengers sometimes forgetting to put a mask back on after eating or drinking, people are actually almost always keeping their faces covered, even if it's not the law.
I've not had an issue and I've flown a bunch, but that's not an excuse for the Department of Transportation and the FAA to not take on this decision. You're not giving us a backstop if we have an issue on the aircraft.
The FAA says it will monitor how airlines handle the virus, leaving open the possibility of new regulations. Patrick Terpstra, Newsy, Washington.
That's it for our show tonight. We'll be back next week, but you know what they say. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. More in the Loop, same time, same place, Monday. Stick around to watch our latest investigation, Prescription Denied.